What's a little bit like a map, but way better than a map? If you guessed a map, well, that's kind of wrong since I said it wasn't a map. If you guessed a logbook, now you're definitely on the right track. I've been doing quite a few logbooks recently, including for most of the Khalgurans, with Gwenin being the only exception since I never liked gambling anyway, and if I'm going to do it, I might as well do something for content that I actually enjoy. One aspect of logbooks which I find is often dismissed far too early is the value of the artifacts themselves. Many people see a logbook as you run the logbook and then you sell all the rerolls that you get. This is not the right way to profit, and hopefully by the end of this video, you'll be able to see a demonstration as to how much more valuable it is to use all of the rerolls that you get and all of the artifacts that you get, or at the very least the artifacts, since you can buy more rerolls and you can't buy more artifacts, rather than just selling them right off the bat. To start with, I'm going to get into some of the logbooks that I did, along with my methodology. Then I'm going to get into a little bit of how I did them. Finally, I'll start talking about the drops and the profitability of just doing the logbooks and selling rerolls versus using them over the course of time. So to start with, I did 42 Knights of the Sun logbooks. This is for the Khalguran Dannig, who is the leader of the group, and is tied to the boss Olroth. And if you're familiar at all with Wordloop and the flask that you use, yep, that guy. I ended up buying a bunch of these with the goal of running, well, 50 or so. I ended up with 21 logbooks with mods that I actually wanted to run. I wasn't being super picky, but I was trying to prioritize as many Utsel Outskirts and Vaal Temple, because those are both very good layouts and I enjoy them. I was also running things like Volcanic Island, Shipwreck Reef. You'll see a lot of Shipwreck Reef in the footage because I ended up with a ton of those somehow. And pretty much anything that wasn't bad. For more details on which logbook layouts are good and which ones are bad, I do have a video from a recent league where I talked about that in more detail. That'll be in the card right now, and you can check that out later, along with some resources on how to interact with each of the Khalgurans. In terms of actually running the logbooks, I was going for specific remnants and as many skulls as possible. On the remnants, I was looking for things that duplicated runic monsters, modified artifacts, added currency, or added essences as rewards. Other things like fossils and scarabs were nice, but definitely not required. And beyond that, my goal was to get as many runic monsters as possible, so I was going for the skulls. Don't worry too much about optimizing each logbook layout. I know 50C or 60C as an investment does sound like a lot of money. You're going to make so much profit in return that it's better to optimize for speed. Get through it fast, don't spend too much time thinking and worrying about perfection. Really, the only time I undo my choices is if I get a runic monsters or duplicated mod. Also, underground areas and bosses are very good. They offer a stack of reward chests or a stack of reroll currencies. You can easily get 20 plus rerolls from a boss if it's juiced enough. The more remnants that you have, the more dangerous the boss will be. The more remnants you have, generally, the more rewards the boss drops. So try to have them later in the chain rather than earlier. And that reminds me, another layout that I quite like is Forest Ruins, and usually you can loop things around to hit bosses very easily on that layout in particular. Unlike some things such as Vaal or Utsel, which kind of go in big circles, Forest Ruins is more of a box, and so layouts that are very boxy, Volcanic Islands and Battleground Graves also kind of work like that, generally let you loop around to the boss much more easily than layouts that tend to follow a defined circle with some dead zones. In terms of fighting the bosses themselves, Varana is pretty easy. I don't remember any of Medved's mechanics, so I'm just going to assume he's easy. Uhtred has way too many phases and is super annoying because you have to dodge these lasers, and the fight that you're seeing right now, Olroth, is pretty difficult, but not that bad. If you've ever fought Crystal King, a lot of his moveset is very similar. The big tip I have for you is use the ads as fuel if you have on kill or on hit effects. Don't stand in the degens, and if you hear him say Wasteland, run away, otherwise you're definitely going to die. So I bought 21 Knights of the Sun logbooks and 21 Phenomenal Plague Arachnids to split them. This resulted in me having 42 Knights of the Sun logbooks, which cost about 12.8 divines. Give or take, some of this stuff might not match up with current divine prices since I did most of this a few days ago. And that's something really important to keep in mind whenever you're talking about the economy in Path of Exile. Prices change over time. When I did this, Divines were 180 chaos each, so that's the context through which I'm going to be talking about things in this video. Now, they're 190 chaos each, which means all of the information is technically inaccurate. But I don't really expect anyone to exactly one-for-one copy what I did here and get the exact same amount of currency. You're going to get a little bit more or a little bit less based on variance. Maybe you'll have more bosses than I did. Maybe you'll drop a flask worth a couple divines. That's not something that happened, by the way. Maybe you'll get a little bit less. This is just to give you a rough idea. Treat it as a guideline, and remember, prices are always flexible. In fact, kind of to prove this point, I did one extra logbook right after I recorded all this stuff, and I got an Enlighten. That would have actually been a significant additional profit on top of everything else that I had, but it wasn't in my dataset and I wasn't about to just shove it in, even if it did happen right afterwards. So I spent about 13 divines. What I got back was around 412 Burial Medallions, which was approximately 21 divines, and a bunch of additional junk worth around 12. So if we want to do some quick math, I spent 13 and I got back 33, which is a profit of 20 divines. It took me about 4 hours to run all the logbooks, and that's pretty solid. At least, pretty solid if you compare it to a lot of other things that you can do in Path of Exile. It's about 8.3 divines in wealth generated per hour, or about 5 divines in profit generated per hour. But remember what I said at the start. It's not just about obtaining all those rerolls and artifacts, it's also about using them. And that's where the profit really starts to scale to crazy levels. Before I do though, a quick reminder that if you're finding this helpful, maybe you learned something about logbooks or Expedition in general, be sure to leave a like, and next time a friend asks you how to do Expedition, share it with them, since between this video and the cards, there's a lot of resources here. For more content, such as some information about how my build works, get subscribed, or you can check out my second channel, 10 Gaming Thoughts, where I recently talked about Bless being unreleased and re-released immediately, because that game just refuses to die. More about that in the video in the card right now. Before I get back to things, a special thanks to my patrons and channel members. Your support is especially important for videos like this one that take a long time and I can't make in just a day or two based on my gameplay experiences. I know it might seem like this content is very simple and I'm just reading from a list, but it took a couple days for me to put everything together and present the information in a way that wasn't just a mess of numbers everywhere, since I don't think a mess of numbers everywhere helps anyone. So what happens if you use those 412 Burial Medallions? You get something like this. My methodology was to buy all of the rerolls, and also buy Black Scythe artifacts that were offered at a good price. This is because I had a hunch that Tujen would be incredibly profitable. Spoiler alert, Tujen is incredibly profitable right now. The nice thing about doing this via Sun logbooks as opposed to Black Scythe is you do get a bunch of other rerolls, both for Tujen, Gwenin, and Rog. And so if you have a bunch of artifacts for Gwenin or Rog, you can use those no problem. In my case I didn't, so I ended up selling off all the spares. And in fact, selling spares was a decent bit of extra profit. After getting all the Burial Medallions, I ended up getting about 28 divines in stuff back, which is about 8 divines more, and this only took me 20-30 minutes, which is 16 divines an hour. Imagine how much money you'd make if you had infinite artifacts and all you could do is sit there all day rolling for currency. This is exactly what I did during Expedition League before all of these artifacts were bind on pickup, and let me tell you, it was absurdly profitable. So if your question ever is, should I actually do this? Yes, you should. And now let's get into a few of those specific numbers for what I got. I ended up with 811 Astragali, 433 scrap metal, 380 exotic coinage, 8 sun logbooks, 11 druid in order, and 12 black scythe. So around 30 logbooks and well over 1,000 rerolls. But of course, we can't stop here, since, as I mentioned, I also bought a lot of Black Scythe artifacts, and it would be a real shame if I got 380 exotic coinage and I just didn't use it. Now, 380 exotic coinage is over 10 divines in exotic coinage, so this is no small expense. But don't worry, as I said before, Tujen is insanely profitable. My method for Tujen was relatively simple. I was targeting various currencies. I'd buy stacked decks, Chaos Orbs, Exalted Orbs, Divine Orbs, and Ancient Orbs pretty much regardless of the cost. I'd also try to buy as many Awakened Sextants and Gem Cutters prisms as possible. Beyond that, I'd fill in by buying all the cheap Vaal Orbs, Regal Orbs, Regrets, Scours, Chromes, Alts, and Fusings. There's a decent chance that on top of all of that, I probably should have been buying Jewelers as well, but there's only so much clicking that a man can take before you just go insane. And so I didn't do any of that. And the end result was honestly not what I was expecting. I was expecting to make a relatively small amount of additional profit. Instead, I got around 30 divines in relatively easy to sell currency, since you can just bulk it up and sell it for divines. In fact, it came out to around 32.25 divines, which means if you take into account the hour and a half I spent there, and maybe don't take into account the medical bills for fixing my wrist after doing that, the total amount of return was around 59 divines from 42 logbooks, which is a return of 10 divines an hour, or a profit of 7.6 divines an hour. The whole thing took me 6 hours to run, 4 for the logbooks, a half hour to use the Burial Medallions, and an hour and a half for the Exotic Coinage. I started with an investment of around 13 divines. I got back 59 divines. So about 6 hours in total, which is honestly quite a lot of profit per hour. Even accounting for the initial cost, 7.7 divines per hour is very good. And again, you could probably do better than I did. After all, I had to spend time recording all of this, thinking about my methodology and how it's going to translate into a video, and that does slow me down. Of course, my build's also quite good for this. I made a Shield Crush Trickster specifically to farm Expedition, so this could also be less if your build isn't as optimal for Expedition, or you're not as experienced in selecting the remnants. If that is the case, don't worry, over time you'll get better at it. And if you're wondering, well, how did you get so many logbooks to begin with? First of all, by doing Sun logbooks, you get a lot back. I could do a whole round of Black Scythe after this, would be no problem. Second of all, I go to the Forbidden Trove Discord, I go to the Expedition channel, Bulk Wanna Sell, and I just buy a big old stock of logbooks. I run all the ones that I want, and then when I'm done running logbooks, I just resell everything that I have left. Which is exactly what happened for Black Scythe logbooks, because after all that clicking, I definitely didn't want to interact with Tujen anytime soon. I think it's safe to say that logbooks are extremely profitable. Right now, I would either run Knights of the Sun, if you have the investment to put in, or Black Scythe. Make sure you have enough currency to buy more than one, since it's entirely possible to get unlucky over the course of a single logbook, but you're unlikely to get unlucky over the course of 100. And remember, always, always, always use your rerolls and use up your artifacts, to go back to the original cost and original returns. If I just run all the logbooks, all 42 of them, and not used any of the rerolls, I would have made 20 divines in profit. If I just used the Burial Medallions, I would have made 28 divines in profit, which is about 60% of the total, as I made a whopping 46 divines in raw profit after expenses by doing this, running the logbooks, and using all my artifacts. Again, if you want to save some currency, definitely do Black Scythe. Super profitable. You'll get to know Tujen way better than you ever wanted to. If you have the money, I do think the Knights of the Sun logbooks are worth it, because it was just absurdly fast and absurdly profitable to get all the additional logbooks and all the additional Black Scythe currency. Of course, this depends on the price of the logbooks. When I bought them, they were 50 to 55C each, with Black Scythe being 45C each. But if Knights of the Sun go up to, let's just say, 70, and Black Scythe go down to 40, then it's entirely possible that it's better to run Black Scythe. When it comes to pricing and currency making in Path of Exile, always do your own research and always check prices before investing in a strategy. But I can definitely say that Expedition is still absurdly profitable, one of my favorite and most reliable money-making strategies in PoE, and if you're wondering what am I going to play next, guess you'll just have to get subscribed to find out. And so now I'm curious, are you going to do some logbooks? And if so, what are you going to use the money on? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. A special thanks to my patrons and YouTube channel members. Your support helps keep me independent and allows me to turn down things like sketchy mobile game sponsorships. You can do so for as low as $1 a month over on Patreon. Or, if you want to support me completely for free, then you can join the community by hopping into my Discord, link below. If you want more content, check out my second channel, 10 Gaming Thoughts. It's a place that I use to review games, ramble my way through video essays, and a lot more. Or of course, you can just click the suggested video in the card right now. I hope you learned something today, and maybe I'll see you again sometime soon.